"We maintain certain standards here." The tournament director's words cut through the air like ice. In the marble-lined halls of the Metropolitan Chess Club, where crystal chandeliers cast judgmental light on mahogany tables, 14-year-old Alex Mitchell clutched his worn chess set closer to his chest. His second-hand jacket suddenly felt heavier under the disapproving stares of wealthy patrons, their designer suits and quiet whispers forming an invisible wall between him and the tournament tables. They didn't need to say it aloud. Everything from the gold-trimmed tablecloths to the champagne flutes screamed that he didn't belong. The annual Metropolitan Invitational wasn't just any chess tournament. It was where New York's elite gathered to prove their intellectual superiority over imported wines and carefully curated conversations. Tonight's grand prize, $50,000 in membership in the city's most exclusive chess circle. Among the spectators, faces that frequently graced magazine covers sipped expensive beverages, their jewelry catching the light as they observed the social drama unfolding. In the corner, partially hidden behind a marble column, a distinguished gentleman in a simple black suit watched the scene with growing interest. Alex's fingers traced the worn night-piece in his pocket, the one his grandfather had taught him with, the one he'd used to beat every computer program and street hustler in the city. His national rating would have made him the highest-ranked player in the room, but that didn't matter here. What mattered was his address, his clothes, his social status. What nobody noticed was how the man in the black suit had stopped watching the tournament tables and was now studying the situation with the intensity he usually reserved for his most memorable roles. The tournament director adjusted his gold cufflinks, a practiced gesture that had intimidated countless others before. "Young man, this is a private invitational event. The entry fee alone is—" He paused, eyes scanning Alex's worn sneakers and department store jeans. "Likely beyond your means. Perhaps the park tables would be more appropriate for your level of play." Several spectators poorly concealed their smirks behind crystal glasses. A woman in pearls whispered something to her companion, both glancing at Alex's second-hand jacket. The boy's hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. "I saved up for the entry fee, sir. I've been working weekends at the coffee shop for 6 months. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a carefully folded envelope. "I have the registration forms, too, and my national rating certificate. I'm rated higher than 90% of your registered players." The tournament director's face flushed red at this last statement, his carefully maintained composure cracking. Behind him, the man in the black suit set down his drink, his expression shifting from casual observation to focused attention. "Ratings?" The tournament director's laugh echoed through the marble hall, drawing more attention from the gathering crowd. "This isn't about ratings, boy. This is the Metropolitan Invitational. We have standards, traditions. Our members represent the finest families in New York. We can't simply allow anyone with a few dollars saved from serving lattes to participate." Alex's grandfather's night-piece felt heavy in his pocket. 6 months of early mornings, burnt fingers from hot coffee, and endless calculations about tips and savings, all dissolving under the harsh chandelier light. A younger player at one of the tournament tables, probably fresh from private school, snickered and stage-whispered to his opponent, "Guess he thought chess was like basketball, something anyone could play." The man in the black suit moved away from his column now, his purposeful stride carrying the quiet intensity that had marked his most memorable screen performances. Every head turned as Gary Oldman crossed the floor, his presence commanding attention without a single word. The tournament director's smug expression faltered slightly as the actor approached, recognition dawning in his eyes. The room's atmosphere shifted palpably as Oldman approached. His casual black suit might have been less expensive than the tournament director's, but he wore it with the gravitas of a man who had portrayed kings and spies. The whispers changed tone immediately, memories of his roles, his awards, his prestige rippling through the crowd. I couldn't help but overhear. Oldman's voice carried that distinctive blend of refinement and authenticity that had defined his career. "You mentioned something about standards?" His eyes met Alex's, seeing past the worn clothes to the determined set of the boy's shoulders, the way his fingers unconsciously moved in classic chess patterns at his side. The tournament director straightened his tie, caught between his previous dismissiveness and the sudden presence of Hollywood royalty. "Mr. Oldman, what an honor. I was just explaining to this young man that our tournament has certain prerequisites. Surely you understand the need to maintain the proper social atmosphere." He gestured vaguely at the luxurious surroundings, the wealthy patrons, the carefully curated exclusivity of the event. Oldman's smile carried the same quiet danger he'd brought to his most iconic roles. "Proper social atmosphere," he repeated, each word measured and precise. "Tell me, do you know why I learned to play chess?" He didn't wait for an answer, moving instead to one of the ornate tournament tables, his hand brushing the expensive wooden pieces. "I learned on a plastic set, in a community center in South London. The pieces were cheap, some were missing. We used bottle caps as replacements." The silence in the room deepened. Even the bartenders had stopped pouring drinks, caught in the gravity of the moment. Alex watched, barely breathing, as Oldman picked up a sterling silver king, examining it in the chandelier light. "But here's what I discovered," he continued. "The plastic king moved exactly the same as this one. The moves don't change based on the price of the piece or the clothes of the player. Chess," he set the king down with quiet precision, "is perhaps the most democratic game ever created. The pieces don't care if you're a king or a pauper, if you learned in a palace or a park." His eyes swept the room, meeting the gaze of various spectators who suddenly found their champagne glasses fascinating. "They care only about one thing. Can you play?" The tournament director's face had gone from red to white, his carefully maintained authority crumbling under the weight of Oldman's words. Alex stood straighter, his grandfather's night-piece warm in his pocket, as he felt the air of superiority in the room begin to crack. "With all due respect, Mr. Oldman," the tournament director's voice struggled to maintain its authoritative tone. "This isn't about the game itself. It's about tradition, about maintaining certain standards that our members have come to expect. This boy might be talented, but—" "Might be?" Alex's voice surprised everyone, including himself. He pulled out his phone, opening the National Chess Federation's website. "I'm rated 2,187. That's expert level. I've won 32 rated tournaments in the past year. I've beaten 3 masters." His voice grew stronger with each achievement, years of victories giving him courage. "How many of your players can say that?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back actually whistled. 2,187 was a rating that demanded respect in any venue. One of the older players, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, leaned forward to peer at Alex's phone screen. "Good God," the man muttered. "The boy's telling the truth. I've been playing 30 years, and I'm only 1850. He turned to the tournament director, his expression sharp. "You're about to turn away the highest-rated player in the room because of his clothes." Oldman's smile widened slightly, but his eyes remained intense. "You mentioned standards," he said to the director. "What higher standard could there be in a chess tournament than the ability to play chess? Unless," his voice took on the quiet, dangerous tone that had chilled audiences worldwide, "you're afraid this young man might embarrass some of your more traditionally qualified players." The tournament director's composure cracked completely. "This is absurd. We can't change our policies for one boy, no matter who speaks for him, even if he is technically qualified." He gestured at the other participants, the wealthy spectators, the luxurious surroundings. "What would our sponsors say?" What about our members? This tournament has a certain reputation to maintain. Yes, it does, Oldman replied, his voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent room. The question is, what reputation do you want that to be? One of genuine excellence or mere exclusivity? He turned to address the crowd directly, every inch the commanding presence that had dominated screens worldwide. I've played kings and demons, heroes and villains, but do you know what every great character has in common? They're defined not by their circumstances, but by their choices. Alex stood quietly, his grandfather's night piece clutched in his pocket, as the room's atmosphere began to shift. Several players were now openly examining his rating information on their phones. The silver-haired player who had spoken earlier was showing his tablemate something on the Chess Federation website, probably Alex's recent tournament results. The whispers had changed tone completely. 32 tournaments? Expert at 14. Did you see his game record? The same wealthy spectators who had smirked at his close were now looking at him with new eyes, their previous disdain replaced by something approaching respect, or perhaps fear, from those who had registered to play. The tournament director looked around desperately, seeing his carefully maintained social barriers crumbling under the weight of raw talent and Gary Oldman's masterful dismantling of their pretense. Perhaps, Oldman suggested, his voice carrying the weight of every authority figure he'd ever portrayed, we should let the board decide. He gestured to an empty tournament table, its expensive wooden pieces gleaming under the chandeliers. After all, isn't that the true standard of chess, the game itself? The crowd stirred with interest. Several phones emerged to record the scene, their owners sensing the viral potential of what was unfolding. The tournament director's face contorted as he realized he was losing control of the situation. You can't seriously suggest, he began, but Oldman cut him off with the practiced timing of a master actor. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm making a proposition. He turned to address the room at large. This young man will play your club champion right now. If he wins, he gains full entry into the tournament. If he loses, he glanced at Alex, seeing the fierce determination in the boy's eyes, we'll leave quietly, and you can maintain your traditions. The silver-haired player who had verified Alex's rating stood up. I second that proposal. He looked around the room, challenge in his eyes. Unless we're afraid to put our reputation where our pretensions are? Alex's hand tightened around his grandfather's night piece. 6 months of serving coffee, years of studying chess, until his eyes burned, countless games against computers and hustlers. It had all led to this moment. The club champion, a well-dressed man in his 40s, was already moving toward the demonstration board, his expression a mixture of annoyance and uncertainty. The club champion, Michael Richardson, had won his title over glasses of expensive wine and games that were as much about social networking as chess. But he was no slouch at the board. His rating of 2,000 had been earned through decades of play. He sat down with the confidence of a man accustomed to winning, adjusting his Rolex as Alex took the seat across from him. The crowd gathered around the table, phones recording, as Oldman stepped forward to oversee the game. Classical chess rules, 30 minutes each. He looked between the players. The white pieces move first. Would you like to draw for colors? Before anyone could respond, Alex spoke up. He can have white. A few eyebrows raised, giving the first move advantage to his opponent, was either supreme confidence or foolishness. Alex's hand rested on his grandfather's night piece one last time before focusing on the board. The game began traditionally enough. White pawn to e4, black pawn to c5, the Sicilian defense. But by move 7, the spectators' expressions began to change. By move 12, even those who barely knew chess could sense something extraordinary happening. Alex played with a speed and confidence that made his opponent's careful considerations seem plodding and defensive. On move 15, Alex's knight moved in an unexpected pattern that drew gasps from the stronger players in the crowd. 3 moves later, his pieces were swarming Richardson's king position with an elegance that seemed more art than game. The club champion's face had lost its condescending smile, replaced by the grim concentration of a man realizing he was in deep trouble. The end came more swiftly than anyone expected. On move 23, Alex's queen emerged from seemingly nowhere, threading through a maze of pieces to create a devastating attack. Richardson's face went pale as he realized the trap he'd walked into. Every defensive move would only delay the inevitable. 3 moves later, the club champion tipped over his king, the universal gesture of resignation. The expensive piece toppled with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the stunned silence of the room. Alex had won in 26 moves, defeating a 2,000-rated player with the black pieces in what several observers were already calling a miniature masterpiece. Oldman's smile carried genuine admiration as he studied the final position. "Beautiful combination," he said quietly. "Your grandfather taught you well." At Alex's startled look, he added, "I noticed how you kept touching that knight piece in your pocket. Family gift." The tournament director stood frozen, his carefully maintained world crumbling around him. The whispers had transformed into open conversations, phones were sharing videos of the game, and the other tournament participants were looking at their young potential opponent with new respect and perhaps a touch of fear. "Well," the silver-haired player who had supported Alex said into the silence, "I believe that settles the question of standards." He turned to the tournament director with raised eyebrows. "Unless you'd care to argue that a brilliancy like that isn't up to the Metropolitan's level of play?" The tournament director's surrender came not with words, but with actions. Wordlessly, he took Alex's crumpled registration form and entry fee, his hands trembling slightly as he processed the paperwork. The same hands that had dismissively waved Alex away an hour ago now handed him an official tournament badge, complete with the Metropolitan Chess Club's prestigious logo. The crowd's reaction was transforming the atmosphere of the entire venue. Phones were buzzing with messages and social media notifications as videos of the game and Oldman's speech spread rapidly through chess circles. Several players who had ignored Alex earlier now approached to discuss his brilliant queen sacrifice, their previous disdain forgotten in their enthusiasm for the game itself. The club champion, Richardson, had recovered some of his composure. He stood and extended his hand to Alex. "That was extraordinary chess," he admitted, genuine respect replacing his earlier condescension. "I've played thousands of games in this club, but I've never seen anything quite like that combination you played. Where did you learn that variation?" Alex's fingers finally released his grandfather's knight piece as he shook Richardson's hand. "My grandfather showed me the basic pattern. He used to say chess was the one place where the truth always comes out in the end." He glanced at Oldman, who nodded in quiet approval. The story spread through chess circles like wildfire. Within hours, videos of the game and Oldman's speech had gone viral in the chess community. The prestigious Metropolitan Chess Club, long known for its exclusivity, found itself at the center of a conversation about merit versus privilege in competitive chess. Oldman stayed to watch as Alex was paired against his first tournament opponent. The actor's presence had already attracted media attention, but it was Alex's chess that kept it. Game after game, he proved that his victory over Richardson was no fluke. His style of play, combining his grandfather's old-school principles with modern tactical brilliance, drew admirers from across the chess world. The tournament director, watching Alex demolish yet another opponent, found himself facing a different kind of pressure. Other clubs were calling, asking about the young Prodigy. Chess websites wanted to feature his games. Suddenly, the boy he had tried to turn away was becoming the club's most valuable asset, a symbol of excellence that transcended social barriers. Before leaving, Oldman approached Alex one last time. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said, gesturing at the tournament standings where Alex's name now topped the list. "You didn't just win games, you changed minds." He paused, a knowing smile playing at his lips. "Though I suspect that was your plan all along, wasn't it? Coming here, taking on the whole establishment?" Alex pulled out his grandfather's nightpiece, its worn surface catching the chandelier light. He always said the best moves aren't just about winning, they're about making the whole game better. He looked around at the club where players of all backgrounds were now mingling over chessboards, the artificial barriers of class momentarily forgotten in the pure democracy of the game. The tournament director, watching this exchange, finally understood what his club had gained by losing its exclusivity. In trying to maintain standards, they had almost turned away excellence itself. As evening fell and the games continued, the Metropolitan Chess Club had become something better than exclusive. It had become extraordinary.